All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining from. And whether you are joining live or on the replay much later down the line, excuse me, I do want to thank you for coming out tonight, today, whatever, joining the webinar. The purpose of this webinar is not to make you an expert on Lightorama in 24 hours or even 1 hour, okay? The purpose is to help you get a very basic understanding and a functional knowledge of what Lightorama is, how it works, all of the little parts and pieces, how they go together, so that you have an idea of how it all works. So you know where to go find the information you need for the more advanced stuff. Now, what we're going to do is momentarily, I am going to bring up a slideshow, and we're going to talk from it from a bit because it has pictures and all sorts of things that we are going to need in order to do this today. And let me get this to pop up here. Okay. So first, just real quick, who am I? I've been doing Lightorama stuff since 2005, and I started a business in 2008. I tinker with other stuff here and there. Relevant, not relevant, however you want to look at it. So let's look first at the hardware of Lightorama, how it all goes together, and how everything plays out. And I promise you, this is for a reason. Now, the one thing you need to know that is if you are running your show from a computer, then you must have one of these devices connected to your computer. Please don't try to buy them from any other location. You need to buy them from Lightorama. The reason is that the Light-O-Rama hardware is actually speaking a different computer language, and this device is what's making that translation for you. So do not try to skirt around that. I'm going to go over some types of controllers, and this is so you know what each controller does and what its intended use is for. Now, the first type of controller that came out was the 1600 series. This version is actually a later version that came out. That digital readout you see on top was not available in the very first versions of the hardware device. They actually had little rotary switches, blah, blah, blah. Now, this on the right is the enclosure for the 1602 series controllers. If you are in a commercial environment, these are the ones you are probably going to have to get because they are UL rated. Is there anything special about this I wanted to point out real quick? It is rated at 30 amps, 15 amps per side. Now let's back up a second there and talk about the electrical and how that works out on the thing. Let's see, y'all can see my mouse over there, right? Cool. So you see these two fuses down here on the left and on the right? Those are actually two different sides of a controller. Two different power inputs, two different sets of fuses, two different everythings. You've got that on one controller. This right side is what's controlling the brains of the computer. It's what's telling the brains of the controller. It is what's telling the controller that you need to turn on and get busy. So this was the first one that came out. Then later down the line, a cheaper option came along, cheaper not from a quality standpoint, but cheaper from a price standpoint, being the CTB 16 PC series controllers. And if you ever want to know where the PC part comes from, planetchristmas.com. There you go. That's where it came from. This was a lower cost option, still available today. The one big difference between this controller and the 1602 series is this controller, you could actually set the address on the device itself. The newer ones, you could push the little buttons on there. The older ones, you had to turn the rotary dials. This one, you cannot. You have to have one of those USB devices in order for it to connect. Now, this one is rated at 15 amps per side as well. So you keep that in mind whenever you're running these lights. Now, if you cannot run your show, from your computer for whatever reason, it's not practical to take it outside, whatever, there are 3 director options that you can choose from. The top left is the mini director. Okay, it is, while it is a very smart device because it's running your lights, it only knows one thing. Hey, I have power, I should be doing something, and it goes. It has one network. You can only put one Cat5 or network cable into it. That's it. It does nothing more. When you turn it on, it reads the card and starts going. When you turn it off, it stops. It can't stop itself. The other 2 devices on the top right is the N2 G4 director. And on the bottom is the N4 G4 connector. G4 is the generation that it is, and the N2 and N4 are the number of networks. Think of networks as these individual USB devices connected to your computer. With the directors, the top 2, the top right and the bottom, you can have 2 networks or you can have 4 networks. And actually, you can link these N4 directors together, and you can actually have a total of 16 networks running off of directors. So again, how they're used, there are a couple of ways you can do it. The Showtime director with the 1602 built in and the MP3 director built in, it's all right there. You just drop the SD card right there where it says. And then you could also use the mini director and connect it to a regular Showtime controller or a CTV 16 or even RGBs. Let's get into the Pixel world. And I thought I had Q&A available. I do. So if you do have questions, if you're joining me live, you can ask questions in the Zoom session. Look for the Q&A. It's in your Zoom window there at the bottom of your screen right now. Now, when we talk about CMB 24s and CMB 16, these are for RGB devices. Now, back in the day, these were used for floodlights when they first came out. Of course, as soon as I start a webinar, my allergies start draining, but whatever. Yes, notes here. So the CMB 24 and the 16, these actually take AC power and convert them into direct current. Now, if you don't know the difference between AC and DC, it's the difference between plugging in your lights to the wall and connecting your lights to a battery. The batteries are direct current. The wall is alternating current, AC. So the CMB 24 and the CMB 16s are designed to let you convert to DC power, which is what the RGBs run off of. Now, these were some of the first RGB capable products Lightorama had come out with, and they still use them for a variety of products, and you can still use them for a variety of things. We talked about the floods. Way back in the day, these were the floods that were available to us. They had their own controller, they had their own power supply, and this was it. This was Lightorama's first foray into floodlights. So for just kind of a little background history here, that's the only reason I'm showing it. And then what you're used to seeing now is the 10-watt flood. Now, let's take a look at what you see on the screen. Here on the left, you're seeing a CMB 24, okay? And then on the right, you're seeing the floodlights. And the floodlights are going to connect to those little blue ports down at the bottom, the screw terminals. And you'll have your RJ45 ports for where your cable is going into, so you can daisy chain it just like everything else. The next iteration of that would have been the 50-watt floodlights. Now, when these first came out, they had something very radical that no other controller, or excuse me, no other product at the time had, was it has a controller built into it. You could run an entire display with just floodlights and a director and a computer. Director or computer. That's it. You won't need any other controllers to run these 50-watt floodlights. The controller, again, is built into it, and they don't show it here. Actually, they do. Those two ports up here on my mouse, yeah, over there, that's where the network cables are going in and out of. So you can set those up and go, and these also you can run standalone. So what does that mean? Standalone is different than a director. A standalone means you can load the programming onto the floodlight and it would run itself. You could actually connect 2, 3, or 4 of them and just set it out and go. So that is something you can do if you did not know that. Now, what a lot of people are probably interested in is smart RGB pixels. Now, what's the difference real quick between dumb and smart? With dumb RGB pixels, if you turn on the first port on, let's say, ports 1, 2, and 3 of this CMB24, okay, you're going to get all white. Everything connected to that controller is going to be white. There is no other choice. It can only be everything or nothing. With smart RGB devices, you actually have the ability to have 50 different colors on 50 different bulbs. There are more than 50 colors to choose from, of course. You can have them doing whatever. Now, the first RGB ribbons that came out were what you see on the left. You can see they've improved slightly since then. If you're going to run RGB devices, you must have an RGB controller. The controllers from here will not work at all with RGB products. You can have them connected to an RGB controller so that you can have an old school Megatree and a new Megatree at the same time, but you cannot use RGB products on an AC controller and vice versa. It just doesn't work. Now, let's talk about, let's see what slides are next. Do I have? Now, let's talk about the bulb. I lost. Oh, now it's on the next one. Okay, cool. So on the Pixies, now the Pixies allow you to run 4, 8, or 16 strands of RGB lights at one time. And I just looked at the time. I can slow down because I've got plenty of time. And a reminder that questions are open. So if you want to ask a question, if you're here live, you can ask the questions. The Pixie controllers allow you to run 4, 8, or 16 RGB strings at once. The power supplies you see noted right here on this board, right here, and right here, those are the inputs. That's your power supply coming into the board. And then you actually have individual fuses along every single string so that they're replacing at the breaker at the string level. If you had a string that were to go out and cause a fuse to blow, it's going to blow that one little fuse right there. Now, another thing to note is that the Pixies have the ability to have their unit ID set by the dip switches. Now, if you look right here, this is probably one of the clearer pictures of the dip switch. There's one here and there's one here. Please, please, please make sure you have read the instructions that come with it. If you don't, you will try to set the address in the hardware utility like you think you're supposed to do, and you can, but the minute you turn it off to take it outside, it's going to reset back to the number that's on the dip switch. Now, where might this be practical? If you were sending out hardwares, if let's say if you're a commercial installer and you're putting these out in commercial environments or whatever, you don't want to have to mess with lugging a laptop in to change addresses for some reason. If you swap out the hardware for new hardware because water got into the enclosure, or the customer did something crazy, or just electronics fail, you wouldn't want to have to lug a laptop in to change the address. You can just flip the little dip switches and you're done. That is what they are there for. Just remember, if it has, look at the board, look at the board and see, does it have dip switches? Yes, I should probably use the dip switches. That's my opinion. You can use the hardware utility, but my personal preference is for the dip switches to be set. Unless you have a very valid reason, unless it makes sense to you to go with the hardware utility, go with the dip switches. Now, what you see below the Pixie 16, which is there on the right, are 3 of the 4 different types of bulbs that Lightorama sells with RGB. And obviously the one on the far right there is not a bulb. That is the Cosmic Color ribbon. The one in the middle at the bottom, that is a bullet pixel. And the one on the left is a square pixel. And you can pull up lightorama.com, look in their products, RGB and bulbs, and you can see the different types of bulbs there. One thing that if you are just now getting into RGB, that will throw you for a loop, and some of you have seen this happen to others, and it may have already happened to you. The Pixies use more than one unit ID, okay? When we're talking about unit IDs, we're basically talking about the street that you live on in a city. The ports are the house address. So it's using 16 different IDs, okay? 16 different IDs for that Pixie 16. If you set it at 10, it's going to use 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, and 1F. Now, if you are lost as to what I mean by that, Lightorama uses hex 16, base 16, hex 16, hex, whatever you want to call it, counting. It's 0 through Foxtrot, F. You start at 1. When you get to 9, you go to A, B, C, D, E, F. If you set the ID for 30, it's going to use 30 through 3F. If you set it for 60, it's going to use 60 through 6F. If you set it for 75, and I didn't plan this part, so now I actually have to stop and think. It's going to use 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 7A, B, C, D, E, 7F, 80, 81, 82, 83, and 84. And that is, once you get the concept down of base 10, or excuse me, base 16 hex, that's going to annoy you for a long time every time you go to look at the addressing. So please keep in mind that this is what they use. Now, these are the Pixies. You also have a PixCon 16. Now, the PixCon 16 will do, and this is a really bad picture, sorry, but the PixCon 16 will do everything that the Pixie does and more, okay? You can actually run this in a DMX environment. You can run the others in a DMX environment as well, but these are much more suited to do so. These can also, in fact, the only way that you can address and configure these controllers is with the well, you can't use the hardware utility. Let's just put it that way. You actually have to pull up a utility that's talking to it via an IP address, and you're making all of the changes there. Now, later versions of the software have a newer, more updated interface. And from what I understand in S6, did I say that? Then you are going to have an even more refined way of communicating with your PixCon devices. The first time, I will tell you personally, the first time I encountered one of these was at a customer site, and I had never dealt with them before. If you understand the basics of Lightorama, you will be able to figure out any product they put out, because you just have to think, okay, how is this product communicating with the shows? How is it receiving information? Okay, let me look that up. Ah, that's how it's doing it. How is it being addressed? Ah, that's how it's doing. How do I address it? Got it, right? So if you know the basics, you can go through that thought process of, how do I talk to this controller and how does it talk back to me? Now, I want to let you know about one other controller type. This is the Pixie Con 16. The engineers have worked really hard, and they even got Bob the builder or the electrician there to go inspect it. And the Pixie Con 16 does not actually exist, okay? If you are talking to someone and you're saying, I'm having trouble with my Pixie Con, and they look at you funny, it's because there's no such thing, okay? Does not exist. You either have the Pixie or the PixCon, but you have no Pixie Con 16. And some people may think I'm being a little harsh here by pointing this out, but I know myself and I know others have spent hours troubleshooting something because someone used a term that means something completely different when they really meant this over here, and troubleshooting was going this way, and really it would have been a 2-minute fix that way. So please make sure you understand what the products are. Now, let's talk smart pixels, because apparently I did have other slides in my prezo down here that I wasn't paying attention to. These are, let's see, the bulbs are right here. These are the ones that I didn't have on that other slide. These are all doing the same thing, right? Along with the ribbons. Excuse me. They are smart RGB strings. You can address any one of the bulbs individually whenever you want, and it'll go from there. You can connect up to 2 of them together. I think you can actually do 350 counts for 150 on some of the higher end hardware. No, correct me. I think it's on the 16s and the 8s, but whatever. That's not really relevant here. And I kind of point that out because even I don't know everything off the top of my head. Even I have to go back and look at the book and the manual and go, what did it do? So don't feel bad if you don't know, because like I said, I've been at this since 05 and I still don't know everything. That is basically it for the hardware. I'm going to allow a couple of minutes here for some questions. You can either use the chat or you can use the Q&A, and you can see, you can ask the question and see what's going on there if you're joining me live. And while we've got questions potentially rolling in, I'm going to check on something, because I just remembered that, okay. So anyway, yes, this is going to be on my YouTube channel here in a few hours. So it'll be there to watch. The same link that you used to get to it, the syncxmas.com/LOR basics, will take you to my channel after the webinar once I get everything done. Let's see here. Any other questions about hardware? Okay, so a Pixie 16 can handle 16 plus 8, or 16 plus 8. That makes sense to me, I promise. 2,400 pixels on a single Pixie 16. The way the technology is behind the hardware, you're really pushing the limit at 2,400 pixels, unfortunately. Can you go higher? Yes. Can you go to 3,600 pixels? I've seen it done. Do you have to take into account how you're doing the programming? Yes. You would not want to try to do a butterfly effect in a motion effect row, which we'll be going over a few of that here in a little bit. If you had 3,200 pixels on a single network. Let's see here. For those asking, yes, we will be talking about software. I thought I was going to have this live on YouTube at the same time. That's what I've been looking up, but apparently I didn't hit a button right. So whatever. Anyway, yes, we're going to talk about S5 or how to hook up a Pixie controller to it on it. We're going to talk about previews and all things there, setting that up here in a bit. And on the bot sequences, if you go to Lightorama, sequences.lightorama.com and look at the top, it actually walks you through how to do that. Let me Lightorama.com. Pull this up here and let me share the browser for a second. There we go. And then if you look here, oh, that's not what I wanted. If you look here, you will see installation, and it will walk you through how to go through the, oh, apparently I stopped the screen share. Hang on. There we go. It will walk you through up here at the top installation. It will walk you through what to do once you have purchased the sequences from the store. Now, next on my list of things is the software. So we're going to switch over to that. Let me close a couple of things on the desktop over here, pull this up, and we're going to do, let me look and see what I've got. Okay, cool. So we're going to get rid of this one. Maybe. So what we're going to talk about while I'm waiting on my system to decide that it's going to work properly. On the software, we're going to be going over the previews, what they are, how they work. We're going to be going over the networks and kind of some how to set those up and how to do this and that. There we go. And we're also then going to talk about some of the basics of the sequencer and how that all goes together, updating your preview, etc., etc. So let me get this to pull up, and let me just get everything over here. Boom, boom. And let me share this new, hang on, get rid of that. Okay, let me do this, clicking buttons, share screen to, okay. So now on your preview, the Lightorama preview in S5 is where everything is configured from a software standpoint as far as what your sequence looks like, what your programming looks like, how many controllers you have set up, how many different networks you're using. There's other programming to do for a network. Excuse me, hang on. Okay. Sorry about that. S5 is basically where everything is configured from a software standpoint. Now, when you first click on new preview, and I will attempt to show you that here in a little bit, but it's a little difficult because I've got some customer stuff in there I can't show, or shouldn't show. You start with a blank canvas. The first thing you want to do is build a new preview. I believe that's what you need to do. Now, there are a couple of ways to go about adding devices and adding things into your preview. You could say, you know what, I'm going to add a new Lightorama device, and it's going to be main for the name, and it's going to be a CTB16. It's going to be on the regular network, and boom, there we go. I have added 16 different channels, controller 1, channels 1 through 16. Or you could come in here and you could say, I'm going to add a Pixie 8, and it's going to be unit number 10 on the regular network. Now I have 8 Pixie devices that have been added to my preview. Okay, let's go through then and let's do a real world example. And let me just grab something here. Let me set the image for the background. Boom. Okay. Now we have the image for the background. I'm going to kind of bring this down a bit. And we are going to add a mega tree, 4 arches, and 4 old school super strings to this preview. And the reason we're doing this is to show you the basics of setting up different props in your preview window. And it's important to know how they're done. And I've lost my Q&A window. There it is. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click Add. Come on, computer. There we go. And I'm going to create a new prop. I'll say Continue. I'm now going to go and select tree 180 because that's all I need. If you have a tree of 360, this will do the same thing, right? There, you don't really need to go try and find tree 360 because tree 180 and tree 270 and tree 360, they're, my opinion, they're all personally the same thing. But so tree 180, and I'm going to say this is an RGB. Now, notice over here on the unit IDs, remember how I said the Pixie 16 uses 16 unit IDs? Well, right here, you see we're starting at unit 1 and it's going all the way to 10. Now, if you didn't know that this was base 16 counting, you might think, how did a 16 only use 10 channels? But you can see them all here. This is why I recommend bumping this number higher. I'm going to push this to 30. And I'll show you why here in a little while. Mega tree and motion effect rows. There are 2 places you can add your motion effect rows. Here in the prop definitions or in the sequence itself. Personally, I find it easier to add them here in the prop definition. And if you get one sequence that you're working on that you're thinking, I want a different motion effect type row for some reason, you can add it to that one song. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 motion effect rows. Now, when you look at it, you're looking here on the right and you see everything connected together, or all the white lights on. Okay, what's all that about? Well, click on Subdivide. And when you do, this little window pops up. What if I say I want 8 columns? I now have 8 different columns that are going to have 2 different strings in them side by side. Why would you do that? Why do you care? Well, if you've used the Light-O-Rama software before, you know what motion effects are there, or at least the concept of them. But if you haven't, imagine being able to turn 2 strings solid red, 2 strings chasing up and down green, the next 2 strings having raining down blue dots or pixels, the next 2 strings fading from red to green to blue to red to green to blue. There isn't a motion effect that will do that. There is not a single motion effect that will do something on these 2 strings, something completely different on these 2, something completely different on that 2. So if you make a motion effect row for 2 strings, I could even go up to 16. I could go to 16, and now I'd have 16 different motion effect rows that would control 1 string each. But to me, that's a little cluttered, so I'm just going to go with 8. Now, you can do columns and you can do rows. So you can actually split it into 4 different sections. Now, notice over here on the far left, it's created 32 different motion effect rows. Why would it do that? Well, it's got a motion effect row for row 1, column 8, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3, row 1, column 4. Actually, I should have said row 1, column 1 on the first one. Okay, it has created a bunch of motion effect rows. It's even created, see, did it create what I thought? Did it do? No. So if you wanted just rows and just columns, you have to do them separately, right? So now I have my columns. Yeah, I have my columns, and now I could go back in Subdivide, and I could put in my 4 rows if I wanted to. Okay, and if you go click on it, you'll see that it's actually controlling those particular ones there, right? It's not, you know, that's what it's going to control. You could actually come in here and no, you can't change those. Those are on the customs. You can, but you could actually go custom here, and you could actually boom, boom, boom. That's the other thing, is you can go custom on a motion effect row. Let me cancel this. Go back to that, re-add 2 motion effect rows, subdivide by 8 real quick, because I never actually hit save on that. But you can actually come in here and you can say add custom, and now you can have a custom motion effect row that would only affect those lights. Click the eraser, erase those, put that back. And now that motion effect row would only affect those pixels on your tree. Just like that. You wouldn't have to try to draw this somehow, and that's still off-centered and bothering me, so we're just going to get rid of it. But there you go. So that will help you in your programming. So let me hit save here. So this is the tree, and we are actually going to put this tree on auxiliary A. And since we have the option here to enter a channel on the first row and then auto number the rest, it's done everything for us. So we can save this tree. We're just going to drag the tree here, make this a little darker for a second. There we go. Now we're going to add 4 arches. And let me walk you through some of the idiosyncrasies here and show you some other things that will save you time. We're going to say this is an RGB. We're going to put this one on 20. And we're going to have, let's see here, blah, blah, blah. So what you're seeing here is if you wanted to break this arch into sections, you could do that. You could put 2 50 count strings of lights on your arch if you wanted to. RGB, you probably wouldn't have a real need to do that, With traditional lights, you probably would, or you might have more of a reason to do that. So we're going to leave this at 1 for now, leave this RGB, and this one's on 20, and we're going to call this Arch, and I'm going to hit save. Now I'm going to go back and add the motion effect row that I forgot to add in the first place. And now, there we go. I'm going to double click on Arch over here for a reason. No, I'm not. I'm going to save that for another part of it. So I'm going to size this Arch kind of the size that I want it. I'm going to place it right here by the tree. I'm now going to right click on this and I'm going to say copy. We're going to make 3 copies. And we want the suffix to be the number. And the base name we can change to Arch. And we're actually going to start at Arch 2. I could start at Arch 266 if I wanted to. And you see the Arch names popping up down there, right? You can name it whatever you want. You could name this copy of Arch, and it would be copy of Arch 267, and you could have 39 of them in there, and it's just going to do whatever you ask it to do. 3 copies starting at number 2, and the suffix, I'm going to put a space right there, so I'll put the space there, and now make copies. So now I have arches 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to highlight arch 4. I'm going to pull it all the way over here. I'm going to grab arch 3. I'm going to set it right beside it. I'm going to grab arch 2, set it there. I'll move arch 1 over a bit. Now I'm going to highlight. I'm going to do shift, hold down my shift, hit the left mouse button, and I'm going to highlight all of those. And I'm going to go to Format, and I am going to go to Align Bottoms. Now, all of the bottoms are along a straight line. I'm going to say Format, Horizontal, Make Equal, and now they are equally spaced across. I want to, let's see, okay. You might have to squint a little bit to see this part, but notice at the bottom left of all of these arches, is indicating where the arch is starting. Okay, that's where the arch is starting. Think about where you're going to place your controllers when you're setting up your display, because if you were to put a controller right here in the middle of these two, you're going to have to run a cable all the way over here for it to start at arch number 1 there. So on arch number 1, I'm going to double click. I'm going to say starting location right, and you'll see the 1 over here go from this side to this side. I'm going to say save, and now you'll see the number 1s right next to each other. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing for 3. Switch that there. There we go. Now, those are done. I believe I forgot to move those to the auxiliary A network, and I did. Why am I putting these on auxiliary A? Well, number 1, to show you how to do it. Well, realistically speaking, you might not really need to do this for just a 16 arch or a 16 string mega tree and 4 arches, but you might decide you wanted to split those away from everything else. So there you go. Don't necessarily have to. Okay, now those on our well. Now I'm going to add in those 4 old school super strings. If you're new to the decorating world, super strings are what us old timers would refer to as 4 different strings of lights bundled together. Red, green, blue, white most of the time. So up here at the top, you'll see this draw string button. You click on it. And now I'm going to click over here, and I'm just going to draw it on the roof of the house. Double click, and now it's done. I'm going to call this left. I'm going to leave this on network 1. I'm going to say 1 channel per color. I'm going to do red, green, blue, white, and I'm going to move the white down here. So as you see over on the color display, it is red, green, blue, white, 1, 2, 3, 4. Unit 1, number 1. I'm going to say save. And once again, I'm just going to say copy. I'm going to say, give me 3 copies. And to do left, this doesn't really matter because we're going to have to give them all new names. So I'm going to say left 1. I'm going to move it up to here. And this is what you do. You just go through and you draw these out in your display. Now we've got to remove this to another one. We're going to call you circuit 2. And there we go. Renumber the rest. Actually, you need to be circuit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is going to be left center. Grab this one here and move you to there. Call you right center. And you're going to be 9. Number the rest, please. There we go. And now grab this one here. Move you over to there. And there we go. And actually, I grabbed the wrong one. Grab that one. There we go. Pull that, pull that. This is quite possibly one of the most boring parts of doing this because you're sitting here clicking buttons and it could be a very tedious and boring process in my opinion. 12, 13, 16. Okay. Now I have, this is my display. Some things to look at, and you can look at the string summary. This is going to give you a layout of where everything is connected. You can see that we put left red on 1 by 1, left green on 1 by 2, left right red on 1 by 13. You see the arches here. Arch 2, 3, 4. Did I miss a arch? This one got marked as arch aux B. Put you back on aux A. There we go. Always look through your stuff again because you never know when you're accidentally gonna do something like that. Totally not planned, I promise. There you go. So you can see your string summary. You can see your statistics. If you have any controllers that are using the same IDs, then it's going to pop up here as a warning. Now, let's give it a name and we'll call this webinar. Now you're done with your preview and you're like, okay, 3 weeks later, you've got a new, I don't know, a new star that you're going to put on there. So assuming that the software doesn't lock up on me again, I haven't rebooted this computer in about 3 weeks. I probably need to, just saying. So let me pause this. And let me just click some more buttons over here. Long story short, if you're adding something new to your display, just go into your preview window and add it. That's all you have to do. If you were to add 2 more arches, or if you were to add a star to your display, you would just go into the preview and add the new prop in there. If you don't know what the prop shape is going to be, you could just draw some lines on the screen to have it do that. Let me grab preview and demo. There we go. Why are you showing up on the other screen? But there you go. Now let's say I want to add a Oscoyo star. I don't know. I'm just grabbing something here. Chroma Star 15, add prop. I can set the channels for it here. Put this on, let's see, RGB. We'll give it a motion effect row. And I forgot something. I got to go back and show you something. We'll call it Lightorama. We'll call it auxiliary C so it doesn't, or Bravo, so it doesn't interfere with things. and we'll say close. And now you can take your star and you could put it wherever you wanted in your display. And just like that, it's added to your preview. Okay, and I'll show you on the sequences here in a second. I forgot one thing. I'm going to add group. I'm going to call this the arch group. I'm going to pick arch 2, 3, and 4. Arrangement, use preview, and highest. This will help you when you get into various parts of motion effect programming, which we will go over. Props and groups cannot have the same name, so we'll just call this arch group. There we go. And I will hit save. Okay, now let's look at a preview. Let's look at a sequence. So let me do file, new, animation. Okay. Now, let me see here. 1 second. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to do file, new, animation. And in this animation box that pops up, you're going to select your preview that you just created. Okay. This is going to be a 3-minute, 1-second interval, 1-second intervals. 2 things to note on this screen. If you have a pro license, you can add motion effects here. So if I didn't create a motion effect for a prop in my preview window, here I could say, give me 2 props, give me, or 2 motion effect rows, give me 3, give me 4. I'm going to leave it at 0. That's my personal preference. And they're saved as default. So the first thing that you're going to notice is when it comes up, it's going to have all of your channels over here on the left once it actually decides to respond. I may have to switch monitors on my end because it's just not liking that monitor today. Sorry, folks. Give me a second. Let me switch monitors and put all this on the other monitor so we don't have the same issue over and over. What we're going to go through now is some basics of how to set up your sequence editor. We're going to look at networks still and putting it all together. So I'm going to try to speed this up because I know I said an hour. I'm going to try to go through this in about the next 30 minutes. Please, 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 if you have questions, please ask them. Please ask them as I'm going through this. That way I know what you want to know. Okay, almost there. And let me do new animation before I share the screen again. Get this to pop up. Hopefully, there we go. So now, as soon as, I didn't share the right thing. I shared the wrong desktop. Hang on. Stop, share, screen 1. There we go. Now you can see it. Okay, so here we are. We are on the sequencer. We have selected a new animation sequence, and we have chosen our webinar preview that we just built. This is the default view. Here's what I personally think you need to do. Do what you want. Show all items over here on the left. Click this little drop down and save, and click Save View As. You can call this view whatever you want. I'm going to call it working. The reason is that the show all items is literally showing all the items. It's in alphabetical order. It's a system generated thing. You cannot save that preview. If you move things around over here, they don't save at all. Next time you generate a brand new sequence, they're not going to be in that order. But on this working preview, you can go right click, grid configuration, export, And you can export the grid configuration to your computer and import that to your new sequence. So I'm going to move the star right above the mega tree there. And then what was on the right? The right channels. Oh yeah, the right. Okay, so we've got right, we've got left center. I'm going to put right center in there. I got my thing there. The star is above the tree. I got my 4 arches. Okay, so I'm happy with how that grid looks. So I could do, again, click, grid, export, boom, we're done. Nuno, if you're around, shoot me a message on what you think I'm missing, if anything, on this one. And we're not going to go too terribly far into the basics of the sequencer, but I'm going to point things out that you may need to know. Keyboard preferences. There are keyboard shortcuts for virtually everything. If you go to Tools, Keyboard Preferences, you will see what is here. You can copy and you can print the keyboard shortcuts. And again, my opinion, they will save you time. For example, I could build an effect over here, and I could now click on this one box and hit the E key, and it selects that entire effect. Okay. Remember all of those motion effect rows I built for this particular preview? The reason I did that is this. If I come in here and I do this and Shift A to bring up a preview window, and we're going to grab the spinner. No, we're going to grab the spirals. Hang on. Grab the spirals. Thank you. And I'm going to add blue on there. Okay. Well, now I've got a spiral happening over the entire tree. But let's say next time I wanted to have just something happening on these two. Let's do color wash, and we'll have those two red. We'll put these two as green. We'll put these two as blue. And now, whenever you go through it, boom, you can see just those 6 strings are lit up. So those motion effect rows give you the ability to narrow down how you want things to do. If I wanted to have, let's see, the middle rows doing a curtain chase up and down, I could say top, chase, repeat at speed, rotate colors. Okay. Now, when it plays, you're going to see that. You're going to see just 2 strings going up and down. In fact, I'm going to make that effect a little longer so it has time to do it. And you see everything is going except those 2 strings are doing its thing, right? So something else to keep in mind on that, you can really narrow things down and draw them from there. We could do the same thing on the individual arches, okay? If you wanted to come over here to the arch and you wanted to go to prop definition, motion effect rows, add, custom, and you wanted every other arch, every other pixel on the arch, blah, 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 blah. You could do just that, and only those pixels would be controlled when you did something. You could build one for each half. So if you wanted to, I don't know, do a musical little sequence where you're kind of talking about how the evolution of lights, like the old evolution of dance. If you do this, please show me your video because it's a great idea. Where you're talking about how things went from incandescent and we had to do it this way and now we can do it this way. You can set all that up in the preview motion effect rows. So there we go. On the tree, I showed you that. The reason I built the arch group, by the way, and where we talked about that arrangement setting. If I do curtain, did I not pick? Oh, hang on. Make sure I've got it right. Yes, motion effect rows. Okay, there we go. Okay. You know, if you see what I'm missing because I'm doing it so fast, but it should have done all 4 of those at once, but it didn't. And this is what happens when you go so fast and you don't test it out. But it should be all there. Oh, I know why. Hang on. There we go. Get rid of everything here. You know what? Just get rid of everything. Now, Arch Effects 1, 2, 2, and you're still doing it. Okay, so you're still being a butt. It should have chased across all 4 of them, and it didn't. And you know what? I don't know why. I guarantee you, I clicked something wrong. There we go. Now, let's look at the network preferences. When you are configuring your network preferences, you configured them in the preview, right? We set up regular and aux A and aux B. Now you need to come here and configure what's what. When you plug in your USB adapter, it will assign it a COM port. You can find the COM port in the Windows Device Manager. Write that down, Windows Device Manager. You then come in here and you say, okay, for my regular controllers on the roof, I'm just going to leave them at 57.6. They are not going to use the enhanced network because they don't need it because we're not doing any motion effect rows. And we're going to say, okay. For aux A, where I have the tree, the arches, and the motion effect rows, I need it to be on the advanced. And since these are Pixies, I'm going to put them at 500. I'm going to say, and you know what? You can even leave yourself a comment here if you wanted to. There you go. Now, you can export this config so that you can save it in case you click a random button and wipe out your configs. You can re-import that connection here. What else am I missing? So those are the networks. Let me walk you through building a show. Let me walk you through the hub and let me show you what's there. Because with the hub, you have a couple of options. If you're running it from your computer or from an MP3 director, it gives you both options there on the screen. My personal opinion, do not use the simple show, the far left. That's my personal opinion. The reason is it looks for the sequences in only one directory and you cannot change that. Show editor. A show is a collection of sequences that are running at a certain time. Okay. This is with a pro license, but notice you have a background sequence. This is an animation sequence that runs the entire show. You can have a startup sequence. This can be an animation, musical or animation that runs at the very beginning of your show one time. So you're going to have that big welcome to the show, blah, 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 and then carry on. Animation and musical tabs. The contents of these 2 tabs will run at the same time. Okay, the same time. If you have an animation sequence in here and you have a musical sequence in here, they are both going to run at the same time. And your controllers are going to be listening to mom and dad, both musical and animation, and going, what do I do? Because I'm getting told too many different things. And they're just going to do whatever command they hear at that exact moment. They may hear the animation tab for these 3 milliseconds and then the musical tab for the next 300 milliseconds, and then this one for the next 89 milliseconds, this for the next 2. And the next time around, it could be completely different, okay? Please remember that, because it will throw you for a loop. Now, you can put animation sequences inside the musical. Where that comes in handy, if you wanted to have, apparently I just got an email. If you wanted to have a break between sequences, between shows, or excuse me, between songs, right? You could put an animation sequence in there. If your display is getting very busy and you need more time in between each song so that people clear out, you could do it that way. Okay. Interactive gets into triggers and whatnot, and that is beyond the scope of this one. And then the shutdown tab, this will run at the very end. If you wanted to be the smart aleck and pull the Porky Pig from when I was a kid, that's all, folks. There you go. Once you have created your show, you can come to the schedule editor, and as you might expect, schedule your shows. Now you see down here, there's some stuff that I had already worked on in the past. You can do, pick whatever show or schedule, pick whatever shows you want and have them run, okay? What's important to know about shows running: an animation sequence will stop the second the end of the show is reached. If you have a 30-minute animation sequence that starts at 2 minutes before the top of the hour, 2 minutes before your show is scheduled to end, that animation sequence will stop and it will do the next thing on your list. So if you had a second show here in the next spot on Sunday, yes, it's the same show. No, I don't care right now. But if you had a second show starting right after this and you had that 30-minute animation, it's going to stop it. Boom. Now, if you had a 10-minute musical sequence and that musical sequence starts 15 seconds before the top of the hour, guess what? That entire 10-minute sequence is going to play. And the entire thing from start to finish is going to play before your next show starts. Okay, so keep that in mind. There we go. That is basically it for what I had planned to cover. Let's see here. For purposes of things I had planned to talk about, we're done. If you have questions on some of the basics that I may have missed, or something you wanted to know about from a fairly basic thing, then do let me know and we'll go over those. For those of you watching on YouTube, this is probably where I'm going to end up cutting it off, but we'll find out. So let me look over here. Can I run the shows on the controller and can I SSH into the controller? John, no, you cannot remote into the controllers themselves. They don't have any of that operating system type stuff on there. You're going to configure the controllers through the hardware utility or the dip switches in there. I have heard of people using Raspberry Pi with their controllers, but I honestly, it's not something I ever researched because it is not of interest to me. And I haven't had a customer personally yet that's given me a good reason to do that. So I honestly do not know on that one, John. And there are ways you can control the controllers with a Raspberry Pi. They would not be a Lightorama based software solution. I don't think. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think there is anything on that one. Carrie, you had asked earlier about how to hook a Pixie controller on it with a bought sequence. So if you buy a sequence and you install it on your PC, you can then go back and when I talked about editing the preview, you could edit that preview to go ahead and then add in a new Pixie controller. So if you bought a sequence and then a couple of years later you decided to add a mega tree to it that you bought yourself and you wanted to add that programming into it, all you would have to do is go back into the preview and click on add prop and select the mega tree drop down and just add it in there, and it would be added into your preview from that. What other basics was I going to talk about that I hadn't brought up? Please always remember that you are going to have the, you want to make sure you have, and John, I see your question, give me a second. You want to make sure you have those RS-485 adapters. I don't know if y'all could have heard that, but that was my wife sneezing downstairs. This new mic picks up everything. So if you did, that's what it was. Anyway, yes, you can make sure you have the RS-485 adapter is what I'm talking about. Do not connect this to your Ethernet port unless you know specifically why you should be doing that. And you think of it this way. If you can't articulate to an engineer why you just connected it to the Ethernet port on your computer, don't do it. Okay? Because I guarantee you that engineer is going to question you greatly and you're going to lose. The question, what would I need to start out and which product is the best bang for the money? I think I would need a controller and a power supply. Do I just hook the controller to the computer to load the show? Well, funny, John, I didn't actually read your entire message before I said that. Go on to the Lightorama website. In fact, let me pull this up. Pull that up over here. I saw that on the screen. Yeah. So when you're looking at Lightorama, click on this getting started, and how does it all connect is a really good explanation of this is the very basic right here. You've got this RJ45 adapter connecting to the controllers via a cable. It can get much more complicated than that. You could actually go down here and you could have wireless controllers doing all sorts of stuff. You could have DMX universes doing things. You could have pixels and cosmic devices. This is a really great thing to look at and do. And it explains a lot about how all of this connects together. And if you pay attention to what you're seeing and reading and look a couple of times before you jump into it, it will definitely start to make sense. And I like how it has items not to scale because yeah, either that's a really small mega tree or that's a really massive laptop over there on the far left. But what you would need to get started, John, right now, keep in mind Lightorama shipping times are way delayed. I don't know if they're going to get better before the end of the year, but you could actually get started with a Showtime Central starter kit. And what that's going to have is the a director, an FM transmitter, and at least one controller that you could use to set up something very similar to this. I'm going to hit mute here. This is all done with a regular 16, probably 2 groups of 8, 2x8. This has got a lot of channels in here, but this is only using AC controllers. It's not using any RGB. And the person who asked a question in the Q&A, I see it, I will answer you. This is all with a regular AC controllers. Go back to the start of this webinar to see what the AC controllers are. This isn't doing anything, you know, with RGB or nothing, right? So that's what you could do with the Showtime Starter Kit. If you wanted to go into RGB, you would want to look in the 16 by 25 pixel tree kit, which may or may not be available right now. But this is the tree that we're talking about, or it's one of them. That seems awful tall, but you know, there's a symbol. Actually, okay, no, that was it, right? You could get that. Go back to the beginning of this webinar, John, and you will see talking about running it from your computer or from the directors. Also on this page, by the way, for everyone, this support tab has a whole lot of information here that you will want to see at times. The manuals and documentation page, very, very, very well done. You can see a lot of them there. If you need to find your license key, again, you can get it from here. And all of the documentation for all of the products is on that page, and they're everywhere. One other page that is very, very helpful is this network speeds and requirements page, because it lets you know what speeds you can do with different things. And this rolls kind of into the next question that was asked. What's the difference between the black and the red USB connector, and which one should I be using to have two controllers just using AC strings? Well, you can have either one for just two controllers. It won't matter. Now, the adapters that you see here, I will point out that the 485 ISO can do high speed. The 485B now can do enhanced Lightorama. The high-speed adapter, of course, does them all. The USB 485 does the enhanced protocol, right? So some of the newer controllers can run, or excuse me, newer adapters can run higher speed. But this page here is great, because what you do, look down the list and go, okay, I've got a G3 1602. I've got a Generation 2 CTB controller, which is really a typo on the screen printing, so it's really a G3. I've got some G3s, and I've got a Pixie 4. Okay, figure out what you've got, and then look at these columns and see which ones support what. Okay, so I've got a high-speed adapter. I can run everything in the first 5 columns. So if I went down the list and I saw, okay, the 1602 can do high-speed enhanced, the Gen 3 PC can do high-speed advanced, and the Pixie controllers can do high-speed advanced, we're good. You can run them all off a high speed. But, what if you had a Pixie controller, enhanced motion effects for your Megatree, and you had an older controller? Let's go down here. If you had an older controller, one of the original CTB boards, or some of the, even the 1602X, it can't do high speed. So you'd be maxed at 500 on that. The original 1600, not the G3 1600, but it can't do high speed. It can only do 19.2. It can't do enhanced or anything like that. So this page, very, very helpful. My closing thought for all of this. This can be complicated. It can be stressful. I've been doing this since 05. I've had my fair share of stresses. I've had my fair share of I want to quits. And yes, I've had my fair share of that customer is crazy. Usually it's me who's crazy, but Just stop and think how things are connected, how you're talking to them, and what language they're listening for. If you keep those three things in mind, everything else kind of falls into place. I'm using an older controller at the same time I'm using a newer controller and motion effects. That right there tells you you're going to need two networks, because that old controller on the motion effects side, the Lightorama enhanced side of the house, wouldn't work. So, John, to make sure I completely answered your question, look at this Getting Started tab and kind of read the what's new, this and that, and see what things are doing. Look into these purchase options here for the AC and RGB things, and you can go from there. With that being said, that's the end of this webinar. If you have questions, please ask them. Virtually everyone seeing this is coming from the Lightorama community Facebook group, so you can be sure to ask questions there. There are a lot of people there willing to help, and they're doing a great job doing so, and it's taking a load off the folks at Lightorama for sure. So with that being said, you folks have a great morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever the case may be, and we are going to call this a wrap. Take care. Bye.